everyone, and welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I'm here with the gang, Dave, Jen, Julie, Ed. And we are here to critique an excerpt from a dystopian novel. It's called Ratarra, The Legend of Damian by Michael Schwartz. And Julie is going to read.
Read the summary?
Oh, why don't you read the summary? Okay.
Book 1, Rise of Offspring. Episode 1, Return to Kala. Summary. This is an examination of religious fanaticism and clan warfare woven into a superhero dynamic duo action-adventure. The two heroes battle clan zealots for the secrets of a lost civilization, which provide its followers with a level of superpower. The fate of the Divine One himself is at stake. Chapter 1, The Mines. The boy looked out at the stars from behind the bars of his cell. There was no demonstration happening on the ground below tonight. That enabled him a night of peace. The guards of this prison performed many demonstrations on the prisoners in the area below him for all to see. Various tortures and humiliations, all horrible and unthinkable. They called it the re-instruction pit. Kurg, the great Mogoli chieftain of this facility, enforced his strict laws and sought pleasure in making examples out of the disobedient prisoners. On these nights, the boy would cower in the back corner of his tiny cell. And that indeed was the cruel intent of the cell layout here at the Kala slave camp. The prisoner blocks were carved into the sides of a huge U-shaped rock formation on this side of the mountain, closely positioned, directly across from each other, with the cell blocks facing inboard. This semicircular arrangement compelled the prisoners to witness the horrors not far below. Kurg plainly wanted the effects of his punishment felt by all. The boy, Damian, had witnessed far more of these than he cared to in his 8 years here. Once a man working in the slaughterhouse not far from the stables where the boy worked each day bolted and tried to climb the stone wall. He was quickly shot by a guard and staked in the pit. Kurg released his Kelgan steeds, and the boy would never forget the man's cries as the beast ate him alive. On another time, when Damian was much younger, a human and an accomplice guard were hung in the pit by their legs all night. Damian later learned the guard sold food to the prisoner for gold he must have found mining. The guard, one of the Hidari race, was later executed. Kurg could not afford collaboration with the prisoners, the result of which would be fatal. Obtaining sympathy and favors from the guards would undermine authority and be detrimental to his purpose. Besides, any gold found here at Kala was strictly for the benefit of their cultish following, the Kun, and their leader, the great Aga Rosh, or father. Everyone here had whip marks. Some even had hideous holes under their backbones from suffering atonement. The Kun soldiers called it the Ruck Mesh, a brutal ritual the clan itself underwent as a rite of admission. Here it was implemented as a punishment for the prisoners. Kelga fangs were driven under the victim's backbones, which were then strung to a wooden beam. The victim was then lifted into the air and hung and left for what seemed like an eternity. Damian himself bore the scars of his own atonement experience. Shortly after his arrival, the starved boy had been caught with smuggled meat from the slaughterhouse. He lunged at the guard when his food was confiscated. Damian was beaten and strung, but watching the guard eat his food and jeer at him while he suffered was even more painful. The quiet in the pit below tonight was actually somewhat peaceful, and Damian tried to find comfort and hope in the stars above on this cloudless night. But hope was scarce here at the Kala mines, for this factory was a great source of gold, gems, and metal for the Kun warlords, in particular a metal called garvanite, which could be found in abundance here. This rare metal was the material of choice for its hardness and unsurpassed resistance to corrosion and decay, and therefore was of great worth and widely coveted. Weapons and gold were in high demand, for the Aga was ever in need of materials and wealth to sustain his growing power and ranks. The Kun, which meant the fist in their old language, relied on steady output from Kala in the form of gold, tradable stones, metal, and meat for profit. The prisoners were not allowed to make usable weapons here, of course, but shipped out the procured goods in raw pieces which they crudely manufactured on site and in turn sold on the market. Withholding of any precious metal or stone was a serious crime, and Kurg and his chief taskmaster and strongman, Balosh, a huge one-eyed half-Mog with an evil smile, saw that rules were enforced. Damian could never forget his first fateful encounter with the Kun that autumn day 8 years ago. He grew up in a farming settlement called Tyrion with his father, mother, and sister. He was a sturdy but timid boy with dirty blonde hair and hazel eyes, and learned the meaning of labor at a very young age. They lived on a farm, self-sufficient for the most part, and making their way in the world, selling their crops at the local village market. He helped his father on the farm, raising crops, milking cattle, slaughtering the livestock, storing the harvest and feed, and otherwise assisting with the various tasks, of which there were many. He was therefore a bit stronger than the other boys, his young muscles accustomed to burden and toil. He excelled at athletics and any other sport or task which required physical strength and stamina, but was markedly humble and generous, seemingly oblivious to the power he possessed over others, and undesirous of such an advantage anyway. His father had given him a young horse of his own, and he proved himself to be a skilled rider and often rode to the village market on an errand or to a friend's house when he could. He cherished this horse greatly and treated it like the gift that it was, earning its respect and obedience in return. He was returning from such a ride one afternoon in his 12th year when he saw them, a small troop of Mowgli, green-skinned and fanged humanoids, well-statured and muscled, armed and fearsome, bearing the token red bandanas and armbands of the clan known as the Kun. Their bodies they had daubed and disfigured with paint and cruel piercings to make them look fierce. Stripes were branded into their girthy necks. These strange thugs of the desert countries to the south rode onto the farm, mounted on Kelgan, fast and fierce, four-legged beasts of the barren lands. His father Darren went out to meet them with fear in his eyes. These clan bandits had been here twice before, he remembered, demanding a portion of the harvest and slaughter. These times Darren had paid them out of fear for his family's safety, but this year had brought a drought, and the harvest was minimal. The family stood a fair chance of starving before next spring unless they could find work, and Darren could not afford the request or demand this time. His father knew that opposition or defiance to the Kun would result in death or enslavement. Damian would never forget the terrified look in his mother Lauren's eyes as she clutched his 10-year-old sister Lilia's hand as she peered out from the window behind the front porch of their small home. They all seemed to know what would happen as Darren descended the steps and approached the clan chief, called an Ulak. This chief was a larger, stronger Mog, having only one eye and an evil smile, a smile that found pleasure in others' pain, a smile that would torment Damian in sleep and in waking life, a smile that Damian was forced to see daily, for this clan thug was none other than Belosh himself, the taskmaster, the executioner, the genius of torture and pain here at Kala. Damian hesitated on his horse, frozen with fear and uncertainty. Dread weighed down on him like lead as he watched not a stone's throw away in the pasture. "I have nothing to give you," stuttered Darren nervously till the Ulak halted before him. The Ulak offered no reply, but dismounted. He approached Darren and paused for a moment in front of him. There was a silence. Then Belosh motioned to the woman and child in the window. Darren glanced back at his wife and daughter, and their eyes met. Then he reluctantly faced the Ulak again with a desperate look. Belosh laughed. "Please," begged Darren, "we have no food." The smile on the Ulak's face vanished. Such an answer was unacceptable. He drew his sword and beheaded Darren with one swift stroke. Lauren immediately ran onto the porch, screaming hysterically, followed by Lilia. "No!" Damian cried from his horse. "Damian!" cried his mother, now completely overcome with grief and terror. She reached desperately for her son, who was beyond her aid. She took a few steps toward him, but was arrested by the strong grip of Kun henchmen. Belosh turned toward Damian, and their eyes met for the first time. He growled, and Damian fled in terror, but the mounted riders were already close on his tail. "Run, beast, run!" Damian urged the fleeing horse, but it was in vain. The soldiers with loaded crossbows quickly brought the small horse down. Damian fell in the grass and found himself in the clutches of the villains. He was dragged back, crying violently, delirious from horror, and brought before their leader. Belosh regarded the boy closely for a moment and ordered him tied. The cruel, one-eyed Ulak then grabbed Damian by the hair and pulled him close. "You come with me, Ratarra," snarled Belosh, and all went dark.
Well.
Okay, my first comment is,
That's terrible. You can't start off like that.
What do you mean by that?
All right, I'll start off. Just for a second.
okay,
You have a lot of story here. You have a lot of characters established, and that's all good. You've got like the basis of an interesting story, but this is almost like an outline. You can actually take this and expand it into a third of a book.
Yes.
Every single thing that you have in here can be a scene.
Yes.
So right from the very beginning, you're starting off, I'm not close to the boy. Someone else is describing what's going on. I have no idea what the boy's thinking or feeling. I don't know what he's experienced firsthand in a play-by-play scene on something. So I had suggested at the very beginning, I totally took over, sorry.
Yep.
I
Just saying everything I
suggested
wanted
at
to
the beginning that you can start off with the boy looked out of the cell or something, but just make it one scene of one person being tortured and how he's reacting to it.
Yes.
And by the way, I want to know how old he is right away because I had no idea. And then that pretty much applies to the entire thing.
Yes. I mean, the rule, the guideline is show, don't tell. And this is telling. Various tortures and humiliations, all horrible and unthinkable. Show it.
Right.
I mean, the first line is, the axe fell, the prisoner's hand flopped on the ground. You know, Damian was glad that the screaming prisoner wouldn't be in his cell that night. You know.
Well done. Disgusting.
You know,
Not
horrifying.
reacting.
It's horrifying. Make it horrifying.
Right. I would even say start with the scene at the farm.
I kind of
That's
Because it's a scene, and it instantly makes Damian sympathetic.
Yep.
And you
Yes.
understand the horrors that he's seen and the unjust, unjust, the people that have taken him, how
Yeah.
horrible they are, and
Right.
what they've stolen from him.
Yeah.
And you immediately want, to know, is he gonna, get out of it, and are the bad guys gonna get it in the end? So I would actually start with that scene.
Now, would you do? Now, I wondered about that because as a group, we've all talked about backstory a lot.
Right.
And I thought if you did want to start in the present, then I'd do the opposite. I'd either start where you're talking about, or I'd start in the present and eventually move back to that. So I don't know.
Which is what
Well, he did that in 5
does.
pages. I'm talking
Yeah.
about like halfway into the. I don't know when you do it.
You know, I don't know. Something. I mean, if you want it to be chronological, you can start
Then
with
you can
that.
start.
Yeah.
Even there, I would amp it up. I mean,
Yes.
Is the guy really going to argue about grain? I would have them come in and grab the daughter and mother.
I know. That's
And then
what I
there'd
was
be a fight.
thinking. I
Yeah.
actually wrote that at the end. Is he wondering? He's now 8 years later. Is he wondering
Yeah.
where his mother is or his
Are they
sister?
still alive? What,
Yeah.
um,
And even with that scene that you're talking about starting with, it was just a big paragraph until the last page. So the last
Yeah,
page, and I still
backstory.
had comments on how that was done, but the whole thing where they're riding in, there was a lot of explanation mixed in with just what they looked like.
Right.
I think it can be they're riding in and maybe how are you feeling when you're seeing them ride in, but in terms of a whole long explanation of who they are, that kind of takes away from the immediacy of being in that scene where these people are coming at you and they're about to kill you.
yeah. My second major comment is, there's a lot here.
Yes.
I mean, he's created an entire world here, alien races and some kind of
Cults.
battles going on and enslaving each other, and, there's all kinds of stuff here. It's like, just bring it out.
Right, seriously, a third of the book.
It's terrific, imaginative, and there's a
You
lot
have to
going on.
start it small, where the kid is learning about it as we're learning about it. On page 3, I think Jen already mentioned it, Damian can never forget his first facial encounter with Kuhn that other day years ago. That's the beginning of the story.
Right.
And let us, along with Damian, learn about these bad guys, because they are bad guys. Another problem that I have, and you're writing for morons like me. Here's a list, okay? Kurd, Mogoli, Kala, Kelgan, Kun, Aga Rosh, Roshmesh, Kelga, Aga, Baloshmod, Trian, Ulak, and Ratarra.
Wow.
I had to make a list too,
Yeah.
to
What
keep track
is-
of them.
How am I going to digest all of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
all in 3 pages?
Right.
And that doesn't
Literally
even
three.
mention his family. You don't even have his family list.
No, I'm sorry, I'll go back.
Ran out of the list goes.
I ran out of red
It's a
ink.
lot of characters in 6 pages.
It is,
Right.
and I just got, and I kept on forgetting whether it was the tribe or the name of someone, because it's all alien to me.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think it's important for him to rethink the framework around the story. Start where Jen suggested and let it build one thing at a time. Have the bad guys come in and be really rotten. That's a great opening.
Yeah.
How would you have any sympathy for those people and you know this kid's gonna be in real trouble? At that point, you describe what he did at the beginning, where he was thrown. He was thrown into this rock cave or whatever. Now we're learning about that. Little bits of it, you have to spoon feed readers or they're gonna get lost. And then when they get lost, the book ends up in the corner on the floor behind the trash bin.
Plus you're experiencing it along with him.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're learning
Right,
with
and then
him.
they drag someone out, maybe it's the first time he's ever seen that done, and now he knows what he's in for.
Or he's listening to screams and how does that, you know, that, you know, if you're looking for torture, there's no problem with finding torture. You could really make people suffer. But in order for the reader to go along with it, we have to feel the same kind of terror that the kid is feeling. And right now, I'm just like watching a slideshow that I'm watching and reading the newspaper at the same time. I'm not interested in it yet. I'm confused, and I'm blown away by all of these things going by me all at once. So little bits at a time, I think, is the real key here.
Building on what Dave said, I suggested using the 5 senses, or as many of them as you can, to describe that prison cell. Because we really do want to hear screams and no smells. What does he smell and what is he feeling tactilely, or what is he feeling in the air? Certainly need more description there. And I noticed that Jen did this too. I started with Damian. You mentioned his name later.
Yeah.
Don't start with the boy.
Yeah,
Say
boy,
Damian.
yeah.
Just dive right in there and give us his name
Yeah.
so we can relate to him.
Yeah, like at some point he actually, you know, on page 2, there are 3 sentences. Damian himself bore the scars of his own atonement experience shortly after his arrival. The star boy had been caught smuggling meat. So you know, so. You know, 4 sentences. I mean, show us that
That's a
scene
scene.
Right.
where he
That
gets
is a scene,
tortured,
yeah.
right? Yeah, show
whole
us,
thing.
absolutely show us that. I mean,
It's too casually described.
Right.
It's
we should be-
distancing us.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes.
Which you want to shove
wanna
our
see it.
faces right in it.
That's the art of writing. Getting someone to follow your story willingly. You're going to suck them in, and the way you suck them in is to be able to visualize and experience what the main character is experiencing.
That sums it up.
and sympathize and care for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Especially
You
in an
worry
action
about it, yeah.
adventure. I mean, you don't start an action adventure with, in the first paragraph, there was nothing happening that night.
Well,
Right,
that's-
right.
well,
Yeah.
There you
That's
go.
that's not an action
Yeah,
adventure.
that's not going to appear on the
That's a good
cover
point.
slip.
Right,
Nothing happened at the beginning of the story.
yeah.
But boy, later it
No,
gets
it kicks
good.
right in.
Yeah.
Right.
I would also caution against calling this Ratarra, okay?
Why?
Why?
Because rat has certain connotations.
Well, maybe it's
Okay.
Ratarra. It's just some foreign word.
I see
Dave's
rat.
list.
All
Okay.
right.
Let's see, I didn't see that.
Now-
I did not either.
I don't think the Hunger Games would have published 10 million books if the main character was Ratness Everdeen, okay? She was Katniss Everdeen, because people have
Oh,
negative connotations.
yeah.
So what is
to rat.
Ratarra? Is
Yeah,
Ratarra the
actually.
place?
I had no
Well,
idea.
he
We know
calls him
calls
at
him
the
Ratarra
end.
last, and I wondered
At
the
the
meaning of
end,
it.
the first, we know his name is
Oh,
Damian,
yes.
but Balosh says, "You come with me, Ratarra," and I wasn't even sure who he was
Oh, that's
talking
right.
to, because I thought it was Damian, so I didn't even know who or what Ratarra was,
I would,
except that I saw
I
it
would
in
just
the
say be
title.
careful with stuff like that.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
people
you're
have
right.
connotations.
Yeah, well, you
Um,
do.
But I want to commend the world building though, because world building is tough, and you have a cult, you have this, this population of slaves, this population of horrible people who are in control. Obviously, there's a section that is a farming environment, so your world building is fantastic. And that is tough to do. There are whole classes just on world building.
Yeah.
So
You know, it reminds me of Dune in a way, because in Dune, like, there were all these different classes. There's like this mining thing going on. There's this economic aspect to it.
the spice
But
must flow.
it's, sorry?
I said the spice must flow.
The spice, that's right. And, but you're exposed to it little by little. You're focused on the main character, what's his world like, what's his life like, and then, then the
Which
lens zooms
is how the
back.
character does
and
it too,
sees-
right?
yeah,
That's how the
exactly.
character is.
And that's
That's right.
another good thing. I mean, when you're writing in a particular genre, read everything you can that's successful in that particular genre, and
Yeah.
see how the experts who have gotten published do it,
Right.
and emulate it. See, and take what you like and take what you don't like, but read as much as you can in that genre.
I noticed in the summary it mentions religious fanaticism and clan warfare. And to build on Dave's point, all the names mentioned, we'd really like to know, we as readers, which clans are fighting with one another. We don't know about this Mowgli. By the way, Mowgli reminds me of Mowgli in Jungle Book.
I thought of Jungle Book
character,
too, yeah.
but I want to change
I
that.
think of Jungle Book
Mowgli
too.
seems kind of nice and fun. I don't mean to add love. I really do. It did remind me, and you may want to change that name. But there are so many tribes. Perhaps you should say this is not the worst of the tribes. This tribe seems so vile, and yet there's another one across the river that
Even worse.
tortures. Exactly. So, how is Damian in danger? Is he sort of protected in a strange way by being imprisoned in this camp because what's beyond the next hill is far worse?
I had to read the summary a few times. I mean, listen to this sentence. This is an examination of religious fanaticism and clan warfare woven into a superhero dynamic duo action adventure.
Yes,
It's
I
a
know
big
evidence. That's a
mouthful.
lot, but
It's
it's
a lot.
coming later. That is.
All right, does anyone have anything else?
I think there's a lot here. I think there's
Yeah.
a lot that can be brought out.
Yeah.
I do too.
Watch his word building and sentence structure building. There's an awful lot that's clumsy and clunky. I pointed it out. But spend more time on the basics. And it'll read easier, even if it's, for me, very confusing because of the names.
Even by breaking up paragraphs. So
Yes.
once you make this into
Yeah.
scenes, it should
big
automatically break
difference.
up into paragraphs. And that's the other thing about writing action adventure. One of the tricks that I learned a while back is when you're trying to write something and you want the reader to read it quickly and it to flow quickly, you have small pieces. When you want them to take a breath, that's when you might have more space, but you probably have less of that in a book like this. Just depends on the
Yeah,
scene.
I think the enthusiastic writing and his knowledge of the scene is commendable. He's got to tame it down, and because he knows what he wants to see, and I don't, and he's got to then dumb it down for me personally.
So just take this and start using this up to map out more of chronologically what you want to happen, and then, this is summarizing, and then take the reader step by step through what Damian is going through, so that we're with Damian on his journey and not watching it from here.
Yeah, and as you're doing that, as you lay out each scene, you want to make sure you understand what the goal of each scene is. So it can't just be terror for terror's sake. Each scene has to progress the plot. So as you lay each scene out, just kind of beside it, what's the goal of this scene? The goal of this scene is to show that, I'm drawing the blank.
Well, the first scene would be Damian is how Damian
How Damian got
captured.
there, right.
Yes.
And that's an important scene.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
And speaking of that capture scene, please can we have Mom react a little more strongly? Lauren could crumple into a heap, beg at this man's feet, or protect her daughter by tucking her behind her, hide her in her skirts or something. But the mom just yells, "No!" and reaches for her son. We need a little more.
Okay. Well, thank you for submitting. We enjoyed reading your work. We hope that our critique helped you today. You can let us know if you have any questions later on. And thank you everyone else for joining us today on this edition of Writers Infusion. We will see you next time, and keep writing.